All right, welcome to this episode of Rising Stars, and I'm Mick Twomey, and here with my co-host Jessica Assefa, and today we've asked Brendan Generelli to join us. Most of you out there probably know him well, seen him speak. I feel very lucky to have him here. Jessica and I leverage Brendan and his expertise quite often. Before we actually the topic that we're hitting on today. Originally, we were talking with Brendan about really diving into EHO for all. You know, with reward factor going away, what should we be thinking about around EHO for all? But as it turns out, PP2 dropped this week, so a lot of things have been happening, and so we're going to also kind of dive into that. So we're going to hit a lot of different topics today. But before we jump in, Brendan, you want to say a few words, give a little bit background on yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Mick. Thanks for having me today. So my name is Brendan Generelli. I am the Director of Medicare Stars Quality at Johns Hopkins Health Plan. I have been at Johns Hopkins for just over a year. It was a year on Labor Day, actually, but have been in the Stars and Medicare space for 9, 10 years now. Every year is something new and something more and more exciting, and certainly the timing of this episode being so close to Plan Preview 2. I mean, this is one of my favorite times of the year, just seeing everything changing, seeing what we have to do to prepare for next year and future years, and seeing what is going to get thrown at us next. This is all really exciting stuff, so thanks for having me on today.
Yeah, thrilled to have you. I know, Brendan, I'll just double click on what Mick said. We're thrilled to have you join us today specifically. You're one of the names I look for on conference presenters to decide whether or not it's worth attending. So really honored to share the stage with you today and excited to hear your take on Plan Preview. I know I'll kick us off with just general statements, and then maybe we can dive into some interesting nuances we're seeing in the changes from this year to last year. So for anyone who's taken a look at the cut points, I think we all see a whole lot of red, meaning they're getting a lot harder, right? Continuing to move to the right generally and becoming harder to achieve, particularly at those 4 and 5 star marks. So a lot of movement there and a lot of hard work that plans are going to have to do just to maintain, aside from improving. So I know just before we kicked on, we were nerding out on this very topic and got into talking a little bit about the specifics of what we were seeing in those improvement measure calculations. Maybe we can start with Mick. I know you and your team have been diving into the changes in the improvement measures, and I'm going to pass off to you to talk a little bit about what you've unearthed.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's interesting. You know, you look at, you know, we keep talking about the rules that CMS that they're putting in place, the changes that are being made. You know, that we keep seeing, you know, things like Tukey, like the weight change, that, you know, more significantly put lower pressure on scores for higher performing plans than the lower performing plans. So we're seeing kind of this kind of move to the middle. And I think, you know, we've been so interested looking at stuff like that then you get, let's just say, saddled with, you know, some of the challenges that we're seeing as PP2 is rolled out. It's surprising things. You know, one of the things that we've seen now a handful of times already with plans is the ending point for the QI ratings from last year don't tie to the starting point for the QI calculations from this year. And so in actually a number of those situations, it's actually meant the difference in a single QI rating, which then led to the difference between a 3.5 and a 4 star overall rating. So you're talking about getting QBP or not based on this one situation. But I don't remember ever seeing a situation where last year's QI sheet's ending point didn't match this year's QI starting point. Is this new to you guys? Do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I can't say that I have ever seen anything like that occur, Mick, but I think, you know, that really speaks to the importance of evaluating everything CMS makes available to the plans. And in this case, you mentioning the QI worksheet, that's not
Yeah,
necessarily something CMS makes available without a plan asking for it.
without a
So even
request,
going
right?
even going beyond just looking at what's in HPMS, what may get emailed to you by CMS, going out there proactively asking for the data to prove the work that CMS did to determine your star rating, it's so critical. I think many times we just get hung up in the cut point talk,
Right.
and here's something that you expect to see the same year over year and work the same way year over year, and some folks are seeing inconsistencies. So really critical to just evaluate everything you have available to you. And then to Jessica's point, I'll just say myself, we do see a lot of red in cut
Mhm.
points, those higher end cut points becoming more and more difficult, the QI cut points themselves becoming more and more difficult, as we see contract consolidation and plans doing better and all types of gamesmanship going on in the star space. I like to see the red as a opportunity. I like to point back to that to say, well, hey, if we saw this other improvement here, then I bet we can do that too, and
I
use
love
that to motivate ourselves. Because at the end of the day, yes, we want to get high star ratings, but we want to drive quality care for the members that we serve. That's why we're here. So
that's right.
um, I think red could be green in this case.
I love that take. I love that whole approach, and thanks for grounding us and bringing it back to the people that we're hired to serve. But speaking of red and some cut points that we're seeing move the most, I was really surprised, and maybe I shouldn't have been. I know we've been anticipating movement at that 5-star level for those operational measures, but even with that in mind, seeing that 100% again for those call center measures and that small
And the
difference,
appeals measures.
right? And that real small gap between the 4-star cut point and the 5-star cut point for those measures just took me aback. I mean, we're in a situation again this year where 1 or 2 phone calls could mean loss of a star in these double weighted measures for plans.
Yeah, it's so critical to try to strive for operational excellence, and we're seeing that across the industry with those cut points. Um, it does become, from a Stars leadership perspective, it does become difficult on a yearly basis to go back to teams and say, hey, you know what your goal is?
Yeah.
It's 100%. Uh, so it's really important, to monitor how these are progressing forward, but also thinking about how you work with your internal partners to say, you know what? Yeah, we want to get to 100%. I want to get to 100% on all of my measures, but let's be open together. Let's think about what's realistic. Let's think about what
Mhm.
happens if we don't hit 100. What happens if a call fails? What happens if an appeal slips through the crack? What happens, if we get one more complaint than we thought we would?
Right.
Uh, so really, yes, these things are moving us further and further and becoming more and more difficult, striving towards more and more operational excellence. And I think as a Stars leader, you just really need to have open conversations with the people in your organization to let them know, hey, it's okay to let me know, when something's going on. I'd rather know now than when we have 6 failed calls or 10
Right.
failed calls or 15 complaints. So it's a really delicate balancing act.
It is,
It is.
right?
And
Between
you
setting
think
high
about,
expectations and having a tolerance for failure. It is a delicate balance. Go ahead, Nick.
well, and you think about, kind of what's happening right now. Like Jessica and I've been meeting with a whole lot of different plans, over the last 6 months, and running different scenarios, right? With,
Mhm.
they had the advance notice come out. Maybe we're getting rid of a whole lot of these operations measures, and you start seeing cut points like this come out. Kind of makes some sense there, but how do you plan for this, and how do you take what you're learning in PP2 and apply it to, the next handful of months? Because, what we're seeing is, you're getting 98, 99 and not 5 stars.
Right.
What is that telling you about where do we need to focus? What kind of things do we need to put in place? We have, a handful of time, a handful of weeks, months to impact things. Some measures are more impactable than others. But I think this kind of screams for making sure that you've got everything laid out for the call centers, wrapping up any kind of open appeals issues. But what are the other things that you guys are seeing right now that plans ought to be thinking about, given everything that's just come out on PP2?
Yeah. Go ahead, Brendan.
Yeah. So
formulated.
Yeah, no. So certainly those operational measures are always top of mind. As we think through the last couple of months of this year, really taking a look at the PP2 cut points, as well as the final cut points when they're released, to identify some of those measures that maybe your internal data is pointing to. Hey, I'm right on the cusp of 3 to 4 stars here. I'm right on the cusp of 2 to 3 stars here. I'm right on the cusp of significant improvement in the QI measure for this particular measure, and really using all of that to, I don't want to say redefine your goals, but maybe enhance your goals and refine instead of redefine, to say, hey, you know what? We said at the beginning of the year that we were going to strive for 85% on this measure. Now we see what these cut points are projected to be. Now we see what these final cut points are. Can you get me to 86? Can you get me to 87? If I took something off your plate, what could we do? So it's a really important time to reevaluate and work with your internal teams to drive you over that edge.
I like to refine the actions piece. We're putting together these PP2 packages right now. And, we're relying on Jessica to come in and, lay out some of the actions that we're taking. But some of the data that we're putting together is exactly what you're talking about. So taking PP2, which measures are your risk measures? We're looking at those with which ones were you sitting right on that lower cut point or really close to it? Or which ones, like also that you said, we close to that upper cut point. These are the two groups of measures that you ought to take a look at now. How much have we improved, hopefully, over the last year? Does that give us confidence that we've created a little bit of cushion for those risk measures, or maybe given us some opportunity to maybe harvest some of the opportunities? And then absolutely love, probably no surprise to anybody here on this call, that I love that you mentioned the QI stuff, because taking a look at this point, so often the move to get out of decline or out, into improvement, so small relative to going to the next cut point. You can identify a few of those between the next, before the period's completed. That can open up a lot of opportunities for scoring improvements.
Yeah, and Mick, I wouldn't be myself if I didn't add in, as you're looking at that potential for improvement, if you need 10, 15, 20 members to move from the no improvement or decline into a significant improvement, well, let's look at our EHO for all population and focus 100%. Some of the efforts there and bring in these folks that may have been disengaged from healthcare and hopefully work on the bonus on both sides. And if not, you're still doing the right thing for this group of people. So, I really like that approach quite a bit.
Yeah, we would call it the double, triple dip, depending on, which things are you able to actually execute. In fact, Brendan is one of the few people who've changed my mind, changed my perspectives on things at a conference when he spoke. And, he was talking about the way EO for all, at the time it was still HEI, was applied, essentially, because what do you need to do to be able to qualify? And where you were previously, you had a whole lot of SRF members that that you were essentially accountable to help, accomplish all of this, but it was just under the threshold to where you wouldn't qualify, but a lot more members. And so that seemed to be kind of a harsh way of doing this, because you ultimately supported a much larger actual number of SRF members than some of these other plans, but you didn't qualify. I found that to be a very interesting thing that made me kind of rethink the whole structure here.
Yeah, thanks, Mick. That eligibility requirement for EHO for all being based on the median rate of all contracts nationally is certainly a really interesting way to figure out who's eligible, especially when you look at the eligibility requirement for every other measure in the STARS program that doesn't necessarily follow that. In the past, and realistically, we don't know where that eligibility marker is going to be next year with all the contract consolidation, with
Right.
all of the news happening right now. We don't know where that will end up. Realistically, I think it's very important for plans to have a perspective of where they'll land, to know who their members are, who are part of that population. Even if you don't qualify for EHO for all, just do the right thing and help those folks. And, while you may not get the shiny EHO for all reward at the end of the day, A, you're doing the right thing. B, you are going to drive all of these other measure performance by reaching out to these folks that, have been left out of healthcare or may have all types of social determinant of health issues that are preventing them from being part of your routine campaigns over the course of the year.
And these are usually, regardless of EHO for all, to your point, Brendan, these are the subsets of measures that typically drag the measure rates down year over year. They're the folks failing year over year, readmitting year over year, finishing below 80% PDC year over year. So, regardless of the reward, there's no winning stars without getting our arms around these subpopulations.
Absolutely. And if you can do right by them, you can do right by your high performers as well, let's say.
Yeah, so you're doing the right thing and you're helping the stars math at the same time. So, I found this, like when we were talking, let's say a year ago, I was of the opinion that we were going to start seeing all kinds of new leading practices, coming out about how do we improve access? How do we serve this population more effectively? And I've been somewhat surprised that, kind of from a broad standpoint, you're really not seeing a lot of conversation, in the plans right now about this. I'm not saying, no one is, but just as a general rule, we're not seeing as much as I would have expected. In fact, we've been talking to plans here recently, and I've been surprised at the number that have said that they weren't sure, if they were going to qualify. Brendan, you said something earlier about, plans that you talked to where they're not even sure how to identify the SRF population. So based on the experience that both of you guys have, what would you tell plans right now? Are there leading practices that you guys are seeing? Are there recommendations for people who are really just beginning to scrape the surface, of this? Because it's that time where we've got to be, get a handle on this at this point.
Yeah.
What would you guys recommend?
I'm happy to start. Mick, I agree with you. I don't think anyone has the answer. And I mean, realistically, I don't think anyone has had the answer since 400 years ago. When people first, started moving into America, we have seen some of these disparities start popping up. But just because nobody has the answer doesn't mean that we can't work towards that answer. And one of the things that I always come back to is, just listening to those populations. If you're a health plan that has a DSNP plan and you are not spending time listening to DSNP calls or speaking with the DSNP care managers, that is a part of your SRF population right there. For those plans that are 100% DSNP, you have 100% SRF population. So let's listen to what's going on there. Let's identify the access issues that those folks have and try working there. The other piece I think is really important. And again, I'm not in any way pretending I have the answers to this. But a big piece of this is just looking and learning about the area that you serve, knowing the difference between people in this zip code, what type of access do they have to public transportation, to how many people are in a food desert, what are these barriers to care that exist that you may not be able to fix, but maybe you can think through ways to improve other pieces to make it easier for them to overcome some of those barriers that they have to getting the care that they need. One thing that I always come back to, and Mick and Jess, you've both heard me say this at conferences we've been to together. Mm-hmm. I think one of the worst thing that health plans do to people on an annual basis is we won't talk to you. You'll never hear from us. And then all of a sudden we call you in October saying, hey, you need a colonoscopy in the next 2 months or else, because that's what I need you to get. No, we need to meet people where they are on their healthcare journey. If you have been left out of primary care forever, for many years, well, all right, maybe I won't get you to get that colonoscopy that I need for my HEDIS measure this year, but if I can build trust with you and encourage you to go see a PCP, go to a clinic, do something, get an annual wellness visit, get a flu shot, just something to engage you, I'll take that hit on HEDIS and wait 2, 3 years until I can convince you, alongside your provider, of why it's important to do these screenings. Um, so meeting people where they are, learning about how people want to be met where they are, and knowing where in the community you're going to meet them is, really critical.
100%. Yeah, agree with everything you said. And I think sometimes folks too, I mean, we talk about silos and stars, focusing in a, operating in a silo sometimes. And I've never been to a conference without at least one silo busting presentation because they're needed. And to that point, I think a lot of times when we're looking at that EHO qualifying population, the low income, the DD folks, these SNP members, right? I think the silo sometimes happens when quality fails to really closely collaborate with clinical and really closely understand the regulatory requirements around how dual eligible members need to be care managed, and to infuse that. Like, every single star leaders needs to read through the model of care and understand it and help inform it and infuse it with star needs. And the same with the health risk assessment. It's required annually, right? It should be full of star needs, and the care plan should reflect that in every goal within the, right? I mean, I could go on forever. I can't tell you how many times I walk into a health plan and just see extreme misalignment between what's happening in clinical and what's happening with the quality leaders trying to move stars, and the lack of understanding that this is the same thing. Even CCIPs, where they're measuring something completely different, like why not controlling blood pressure? Why not diabetes? Why not? And why not? Why are you measuring it a different way? Let's measure it the way the HEDIS spec is set up. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for collaboration there that will result in downstream positive impact to EHO for all as well.
Yeah, I think if at the end of the day, if you align your organization back towards just doing the right thing
Yeah.
for the member, that's how I define the STARS program when I talk with people. Outside of us and the people who are watching this podcast, not a ton of people know what the STARS program is. So when I get asked, what do you do for a job, and I start talking about working in health insurance, and then I caveat it with well, I'm in the quality side. I'm trying to make sure that people on Medicare are getting the services that they need. But at the end of the day, it's about do the right thing. CMS has these 43 ways that they determine if you're doing the right thing for the member. And if you just carry those practices through, you'll start to improve and see high levels of performance.
Absolutely. I love how you touched on geography too, and understanding your geography and what's happening in the landscape. And I think that's another thing we need to do more to understand all of these rules and changes. There's so many, and it's so hard to keep on top of them all and do your job at the same time, right? But even these rules outside of stars, I don't think we can no longer control F and look for the word star in a lot of these final rules and notices and memos that come out, because so much of it impacts star ratings. And that takes me back to just our conversation earlier about SNP, the SNP population, the Medicaid redeterminations, and how that's really just changed these new special enrollment periods for SNP members, where they can leave the plan at any time and move into a different integrated FIDE or HIDE SNP. That alone, I mean, I could go down so many paths with that. That alone, I think, is going to have a really different impact on the double-weighted disenrollment measure across this country, because as we know, every state's in a very different place as far as integration goes. And some plans might experience that disruption quite a bit, where there's a lot of FIDE and HIDE options to bounce around. And for others, there might be just one where they get a whole bunch of adverse enrollment. And I'm really curious to see how that plays out in the disenrollment measure and in the EHO for all thresholds.
Yeah, I mean, you would sure expect, as we see the integration of DSNP in different states occurring at different times across the country, you would sure expect to see that enrollment target starting to move over to the right.
Right.
and become more and more difficult. And if you are in a state that does not have that integrated DSNP, and you're competing with states that do have that integrated DSNP, it's going to be really difficult to achieve even that initial entry point to EO for all. But from a disenrollment standpoint, I think that's a really great point, Jess. I kind of view it two different ways. One as taking off my Stars leader hat for a second. Yes, you want to see people moving over to DSNP plans if they qualify for them, because you would expect the ability to coordinate between Medicare and Medicaid and the integration between the two and that care management. That's great. As I look at it from a Stars leader perspective, and I have that to add on to, well, hey, here are all these other elements of voluntary disenrollment that I'm trying to battle, and this one that is impossible to get around, it just adds another layer of difficulty and another reason to try to control the controllable within Stars, or the more controllable within Stars, to account for, hey, we're going to lose people to these integrated plans. Nothing I can do to stop that. Let me focus on keeping these people that I can keep, to try to keep the disenrollment level down.
Exactly.
Well, and I'm gonna go back to something, Jessica, that you said at the beginning, and it kind of ties into very heavily into PP2 and actions to be taken right now, and kind of interestingly, a lot that's going on LinkedIn right now.
Mm-hmm.
But you were talking about all the red. Now cut points are getting harder, right? And how often have we sat down with a plan and there typically when you find plans that are negatively surprised when PP2 comes out, you talk to them about what cut point projections were you using. They're like, well, we were using last year's cut points. And it's been a challenging thing. People who have used last year's cut points traditionally run into some negative surprises pretty much every September, right?
Yes.
And I think, it's kind of nice seeing, there have been people out on LinkedIn for years saying, well, if you've got people telling you they forecast cut points, that's, they're making things up. Reality is you have to forecast cut points if you want to be competitive. And it's good to see some of those people who are saying that now kind of getting on that bandwagon. So we're seeing a lot more people now talking about projecting cut points, which I think is fantastic for the industry. It's definitely where we need to go. But if you were one of those plans that maybe didn't project that and were using last year's cut points, you got a big negative surprise, this week. And so with that in mind, there's still time to impact Stars 2027. But, what are the specific actions that you guys might recommend that a plan in that situation is taking? Maybe they were anticipating 4 stars and getting QBP, and now they're coming in and it's 3.55. So now we've got to think about, all right, what can we still touch for Stars 2027, and how do we go about at least laying out that plan? Put you guys in that situation and walk me through it.
Yeah, so if I was a plan that was using last year's cut points, I probably would have learned by now to maybe not do so, because I would have been unpleasantly surprised, like you said, Mick.
Yep.
And I know I'm speaking with one of the experts in cut point forecasting here, but as someone who is certainly not an expert in that, yes, you can work towards very advanced models of cut point forecasting, but you can also look at trends over the past couple of years and see, hey,
Sure.
Every year we're seeing increases.
Right.
If 5 stars last year was 80%, 9 times out of 10, it's not going to be 80% this year. It's probably going to be 82, 83, 84. I really strongly believe that no matter what you do, I would rather spend all year telling my leadership team, hey, we're going to be a 4-star plan, or hey, we're going to be a 3.5-star plan, we're going to be a 3-star plan, and then be pleasantly surprised and say, hey, you know what? I was wrong. We did better than I thought we would. So first thing I would do would be to consider adjusting my cut point targets. But now that I have that to the side, again, I think it's really about rallying the troops to say, hey, we saw what happened this year. Here's where the difference was. We fell behind on these couple of measures. We don't need to fall behind again, because while we may not be able to outperform on this measure that we missed in the 2026 rating,
Mhm.
I can make up for that loss in these couple of measures for 2027 if I have the
Yep.
support of whatever teams I need in the organization. Network team, can you work with the providers with me? Pharmacy team, can we take a look and see if there are statin exclusions that we're missing somewhere? Call center, here's how we speak with members, in the run up to caps and through the AEP period.
Right.
Just doing every little thing, just checking in with those folks that are so important to driving the success of your organization. The STARS team knows how the STARS math works. We work with the rest of the organization to make sure that we meet that math. We need the other people in the organization to collaborate with us and getting that message out there. Knowing when to pull the fire alarm with leadership is really important at this time of year.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, that's where, of course, you're looking at the math and allowing that to guide you. And this is who you are at your core, right? A data-driven individual. I think, though, I'm often surprised how many plans, and maybe not surprised, but I just see over and over plans who use that math at the beginning of the year, maybe look at it a little in the beginning, they set their goals, and they just keep driving blindly towards those goals, where maybe those goals made a whole lot of sense in quarter one and in some sense in quarter two, but they're not the Q4 push goals. And they forget to do that PP2 analysis exercise Mick was talking about,
100%.
and you were talking about together, the two of you. I loved that back and forth at the beginning. And using data like to drive the Q4 analysis and not getting lost in your projects.
Yeah, exactly. If I had set a goal at the beginning of the year that I want, I don't know, colorectal cancer screening to be 85% at the end of the year, and I'm entering Q4 right now and I see that I'm at 75%, I'm probably not going to hit that goal, but I need to be able to make up for that in order to get to my STARS calculation. So over the course of the year, you really need to continually be looking at the data, remodeling your model, for lack of better words. And then with PP2, just realizing how close or how far you were, taking that opportunity again to say, all right, I said we needed to do this. Well, we still do, but now we need to do this on top of it. Or, hey, we're never going to hit that colorectal goal that I set. What can we do to maintain? What can we do to avoid the significant decline in the QI measure and move our efforts someplace else to make up for that loss or that non?
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, at the beginning of the year, target setting is critical, right? You've got to understand what's realistic, what's achievable. You establish those targets. It helps you kind of manage through the year, right? But reality is PP2 comes out and has the ability to alter your reality, your understanding of your reality. And you can't have your head in the sand. Like, well, this was our goal, this was our target. Okay, but right now we know this. And therefore, as a result, we need to go hit this. And so, I'm a big believer in, as you said, Jessica, letting the data drive some of this, because there are a lot of learnings that come out of PP2. And if you kind of take a step back, step away from, this is hard to do sometimes, but step away from what that overall score is. But look at what's happening one step below. Which measures do I need to focus on based on what I've seen the cut points do and what my performance has since done this year? Because that's really going to drive the things that ultimately are going to move the needle for STARS 2027. What's left in the year? Which measures can I impact? Which ones do I need to impact? And how do I pull the team together to put a plan together to go execute on that? That's my simple brain's take on how to think about this.
No, that makes perfect sense. And you do have to take a step back from everything going on to complete that exercise, right? Maybe when you're down to limited time and limited budget, right, and limited ability to impact that STAR year, maybe it doesn't make sense to do a Q4 fit kit mail wave anymore, right? Maybe I need to repurpose those dollars, because these, to your point, measures that could go into significant decline are going to tank me. So.
Right. Just move it up that much and make that change. Yeah. Go ahead, Brendan. Sorry.
And one of the things that I, as we continue thinking through how do you continue to adapt and continue to enhance your models to prepare you after PP2 and get you through Q4? I mean, in Plan Preview 2, right, we all know the wording from CMS. None of this is official. None of this is finalized.
Mm-hmm.
It could change. You only get your plan's data. So we have no idea what's going on in the rest of the market. We're not supposed to know what's going on in the rest of the market.
Right.
So we wait for the final release from CMS. And one thing I do every year, the minute that final data is out, is I go in, I take a look at my data. I'll say colorectal cancer screening again because I've been using that as the example all day.
It's the go-to.
Hey, in my 2026 star rating, I got X number of stars. Well, let me see who the 5-star plans are, and let me look at their rates,
Right.
and let me see, what do I know about those plans? What are they doing differently? What can I learn from these people that are doing a great job taking care of their members that I can bring to take care of my members? If you're not going through, all of that data available from CMS and marking it up and doing conditional formatting and all types of things to draw attention to it, you're doing yourself a disservice. Nobody, again, I don't believe that anybody has the magic wand that gives themselves 5 stars over and over. Nobody has coming up with this idea that is so radical and so radically different that you cannot do this probably. So taking a look at who these high achievers are in the measures that you want to excel in and trying to learn what you can about what they're doing, not doing any spying or anything. I realize that sounds like it as I'm saying it, but going out there, seeing, what makes this provider or what makes this insurer so different? What does their population look like? What does it say on their website about care management programs, things like that I'm not doing? Doing that type of analysis, really helps you think about what can I achieve, but also as you're speaking with leadership, helps you think, well, is this a problem with my plan? Is this a problem with my service area? Is this a problem with the country as a whole that I'm trying to overcome to achieve this next level of stars?
Because that completely
you can reach out to us,
right? What direction you move into solution. Is it a national problem or a me problem? Mick's team does this peer analysis that I think really just kind of gets, I love it. It gets to the heart of that, all these other contracts that have similar enrollment to me in this area, how are they performing? And if they're doing it and they're sharing, their members are in the same counties and they're using the same providers, yeah, to your point, Brendan, like that becomes a me problem then. What do we need to do different?
And it's going to be even better once we're able to access Brendan's network of secret spies to be able to bring all the additional insights in here. So at this point, I just want to say, this was, I thought, especially for this PP2 week, this was a fantastic time, getting together and touch on all of this. And before we kind of officially sign off for today, is there anything that we missed? Anything that either of you guys think that we need to touch on before putting a close on this one?
Yeah, I can't overstate the importance of double and triple and quadruple checking your math.
Yeah.
Read everything that CMS sends you. Ask CMS for things that you don't have. They are historically very responsive. They will let you know what they can provide, what they can't provide to you. When you get the technical notes, we all move right towards the cut points. But there's a lot of information in there that's worth reading. If you look at Plan Preview 2 outlier metrics, there's sometimes some interesting things in there that are worth asking about. But yeah, I can't emphasize enough, just double, triple, quadruple check the math and use that information to help you do the right thing for your members and drive that quality of care for them.
Yeah,
Excellent.
I love that. That for me, that's the best final note to land on. So.
Yeah, but absolutely go and check those QI calculations. Request those QI sheets. Take a look at them. Double, triple check. Absolutely make sure. Look at those thresholds. Where can you move them? But, Jessica, as always, thank you so much for co-hosting here. And Brendan, thank you very much for joining us for this time. Your insights are always fantastic to listen to. We learn from you every time and truly appreciate it.
Yeah. Great. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks.